Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams. Daniel, welcome back after our little break of Thanksgiving. I hope you had a nice Thanksgiving.
I've got a couple of pounds to work off, Dr. Paul.
Uh-oh. You cheated a little bit?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay, well, a little cheating on Thanksgiving, it's okay.
It's okay.
All right, but the world goes on. There wasn't any startling breaking news over the weekend, just a steady erosion of confidence in liberty.
Yeah.
And there's nothing been changed in foreign policy. We're still running the same operation. And even though words sometimes are made that may say, hey, maybe they're coming our way. No, I think it's the same old thing. I wanted to call attention to our viewers, and I'd like you to go over this with me. And that is, there was a report out. A reporter went over to Afghanistan, and he wanted to review this thing. What was a year and a half ago? One of the first things that Trump did was drop the mother of all bombs. It was considered to be the biggest non-nuclear weapon ever.
Yeah.
But, we're humanitarians, and if we're going to bomb a country, the main purpose is just to send a message because we have to be in charge. So we told them we're going to do it, and guess what? The people left. They believed we were going to drop that bomb, and there were only about 50 or so houses that got blown up, but that didn't count. I doubt if we paid for those. Mm-hmm. But now he's reviewing this, and the question is, what after effects? There are after effects from just that bomb in that area. It destroyed a lot of farmland, and there's still some illnesses coming from this, and there's still pollution. The territory's been changed. There's been other incidents in war much worse than that when you talk about Agent Orange and different things. But it still was significant. It's ongoing, and who knows what it's going to be like in 10 years from now. Sometimes some of these changes occur very slowly, and then they'll find out, there was an increased incident in skin cancer or something like that. But besides, the big issue is, did it do any good? What was the purpose of all this? It shows that we're tough and we can drop a bomb, and it's sort of a message that we are in charge, and you better listen to us. So this is, but there's always a downside. There's a lot more downsides. There's a cost to this, many costs, and I want to talk a little bit about that today, because they're mentioned, but not precisely that they related to the war, especially if you even lean toward the conclusion that the war was unnecessary. And of course, we're convinced that for many decades now, all our fighting and killing and all our militarism has been unnecessary, and the only people who have really benefited materially have been the military-industrial complex. There are profiteers in here. But today we'll talk about some of the people who lost a lot with our war policy, and they stand to continue to lose if we don't eventually change this. And you can tinker here and maybe make some more rules. Don't use poison gases and things like that. But I say the answer is changing our foreign policy.
Yeah, and this was back in April of 2017 when President Trump decided to drop the GBU 43B, it's called technically, but it's otherwise known, as you say, as the mother of all bombs, Moab. And we did give a warning, and it was a demonstration. This is what we can do, guys. This is what we can do. But without ever, they went away. We bombed them. We blew up a few homes. But when they came back, they found out that things weren't the same. They reported that the crops have failed. The earth is different. It's dry. The rocks break open. The earth is destroyed. They're not able to raise the farms that they used to. The diseases, though, are another thing. The local population is suffering diseases, eyes, lungs. It also is affecting babies. So the idea is that you come in and you do something like this, and everyone says, "Oh, okay, well we got rid of them. We didn't kill anyone." But this is the kind of the gift that keeps on giving, and nobody's even paying attention. But imagine if your own livelihood. You're a farmer, you're a subsistence farmer in Afghanistan. Yeah, you got to go away, you come back, and everything is lost.
Yeah, and we don't want to take away from the token effort to try to minimize the killing, and that obviously is Trump's position. Draw them and scare them and make them behave and put on sanctions and all. But it's still it's better than just literally bombing and killing people. And remember Madeleine Albright's statement. Well, you know what you guys are doing to Iraq, is something else. And of course, she defended it. She says, well, if that's the price I have to pay for us to deliver democracy to Iraq, and just look at the consequence of the war in Iraq, and who knows, maybe that was the strongest motivation there was probably monetary, because Saddam Hussein, was seriously considering leaving the dollar. So there's always a financial thing there. But there's always a cost, and they justify this. But the cost is so often borne by the totally innocent or the naive, the people, because most people would say, well, going to war is wonderful. You're patriotic, and you're going to serve the country, promote liberty and peace, and so they've been snookered into it to believing this, and it's almost like an obsession to try to neutralize that. And the only way they can do that is the glorification of the military. And of course, we could go down our long list, and there are so many things, the consequence, everything from diseases out there, and the people who have suffered for long periods of time, and the many medical complications.
Yeah, and I dealt with veterans issues for you up on the Hill when you were there, and so many of our vets down here were exposed to Agent Orange in Vietnam War, and of course, when they get home, they find that the VA is not as keen on helping them out as they promised when they signed up. The same thing happened with Gulf War syndrome, with guys coming back. Our old friend Kelly Vlahos has done some great work on the burn pits in Iraq. 3 football fields wide, some of them were, and they burned everything from batteries, spent ordnance, paint cans, medical waste, human bodies even, and these were open pits. So a lot of American military service members came back with cancers and all sorts of things. But that's only part of it, because what about the people who had to stay there who didn't come back because it's their country that we bombed? And you look at the different kinds of pollution that the military, our liberations cause, starting in Agent Orange, of course, we actually go back to World War I, but we talk about depleted uranium. And that was first used in the first Gulf War. And what it is, it's leftover uranium-238, and that's what happens when nuclear energy is produced from uranium-235. I'm not a chemist, so that's what I've read. But this leftover stuff from the process is very effective for penetrating armor, and that's why the military loves it. It hits something, and then it ignites, I think, up to 6,000 degrees centigrade, aerosolizes, and these are radioactive particles. So there's a lot of it.
And rightfully so. It deserves attention, but their conclusions aren't necessarily all that practical. They say, yeah, this is true, so wouldn't it be better if we outlaw those in war? So outlaw gases, outlaw these mines that they plant, which misses the whole point. That if you can do that, why are you fighting and killing each other if you're trying to do things to not kill quite so many? And once again, as well motivated it might have been to drop this big bomb and save lives by telling them we're going to do it, ultimately that doesn't change anything, because people will remember that. And of course, the establishment of a free and prosperous society that respects individual liberty didn't happen. It hasn't happened. It's not going to happen in Afghanistan. And everybody wrings their hands. We've been there 18 years, 19 years. When are we going to leave? And right now the years are building up in Syria. There was just a large number of people killed over the weekend, in Syria. 68 people were killed up in the eastern part. That's the area that's our area, because we own that oil now. We can't let the Kurds have their own oil. We get angry if some of the oil's taken out of eastern Syria and moved over to western Syria, and we pretend that we own it, and because we have the power, we own it. But that isn't the way to win friends and influence people. That's the way to build enemies that are long-lasting. And as our economic system deteriorates and as our foreign policy becomes less effective, you're going to see a lot more people doing what they're doing now, looking for options monetarily. There's a lot of countries right now that are repatriating their gold because there's strong suspicion by all central banks that something is brewing. And it's just not economics, it's not just military, it's a combination of our militarism in combination with an economic condition that's very fragile.
Yeah, and you talked about Syria, and we have used depleted uranium in Syria as well. But the U.S. war in Serbia, remember that in 1999, we were going to liberate them. 30 to 50,000 depleted uranium tipped missiles were fired into Serbia, into Yugoslavia, and they remain there. They poison the atmosphere. In the first 3 weeks of Iraq War II in 2003, 1,000 tons of depleted uranium were fired into the country. Just those 3 weeks, 1,000 tons. And it really is a weapon of genocide when you think about it, because when it hits, as I said, it burns very hot. It aerosolizes those uranium particles. They're inhaled. They bind to red and white blood cells and then go through the body. They penetrate they pass through the placenta onto the child, creating birth defects, lung cancer, kidney disease, bone and skin cancer, other kinds of chemical poisoning, decades and decades. This stuff doesn't go away. It just lasts forever.
You know, we're really talking about two issues here right now. And one is war and why it's so dangerous and long-lasting, and the innocent suffer. But we're also talking about the environment.
Yeah.
And sometimes there can be, the same people don't always support the same issues. You could have somebody that is anti-war, but are totally confused on the environment. And yet there's this concentration, you know, in misdirecting efforts. In the military, that's essentially what we talk about all the time, that misdirected energy and money and bombs that we get involved with because we have a foreign policy of interventionism and we can't expect good results from it. But what about the war on the environment and the pretense? There are some problems in the environment. I hate pollution, you know, and I like to see pollution taken care of, but I don't like false information. I don't like the scare tactics of the world's coming to an end in 12 years, and therefore we have to give up all our liberties. Well, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But right now, the New Green Deal, the Green New Deal, whatever it is, they want to spend trillions of dollars just eliminating anything that produces CO2. That means, and this was meant to be a joke, but it's almost doing what we produce CO2 too. Yeah. And look at what they're talking about, euthanasia and no more kids and all this. They're totally nuts on some of this. But this whole thing, I saw a good report on this because I believed it. Yeah. And that is, they said, if you spent these trillions of dollars, nobody knows how it would. It probably wouldn't work. But let's say it did. They spent $5 trillion and they get rid of all the CO2. We would be so impoverished. Yeah. I mean, there could be hardly anything going on. But guess what? We produce 15% of the CO2 in the world. And guess who produces all the rest, or most of the rest? And that is third world countries, China, India in particular. So if we destroy our industry, where does industry go? Do you think they're going to stop and we'll be able to fight a world war and teach them how to control their environment? No, this drifts over. And there's a massive increase in CO2 if they even had the more successful they have here for cutting down industry and producing CO2, the more if you're successful, the more businesses are going to go to China and India, and then they'll scream and holler, well, we need more sanctions and all that nonsense.
Yeah, around and around it goes. But we talk about that we have a lot of good progressive allies and friends, and they're concerned about the environment, and they're also anti-war. Right. So we understand that. But there are a lot of people on the left who go on and on about environmentalism. They're the left authoritarians. But they won't say a word about war. They don't, very little. Look at someone like Al Gore, the big environmentalist. Well, he presided over a lot of stuff as vice president, the attack on Yugoslavia, all kinds of bombings in Sudan. No word about that. The Pentagon is one of the biggest polluters. If you're against pollution, If you're worried about CO2, you should be focused on the Pentagon. The Pentagon emissions, this is something a statistic I pulled up, from 2001 to 2017, the Pentagon emitted 766 million metric tons of CO2. Million metric tons of CO2.
Yeah, but you know, even if you dealt with this in general and you worked, well, we need less war because there'll be less pollution. There's a lot more to it than CO2, since that's a big controversy.
Yeah, it is.
In my opinion.
Yeah.
But think of the other benefits that come from it. You know, Agent Orange.
Yeah.
You know, bombs dropping out of the sky and the drones coming out. Now they're even talking about militarizing space.
Yeah.
That sort of, you know, a pretty wild idea. That's going to cost a couple dollars too.
Yeah.
And I guess that'll be the limitation of what we can do, because eventually we can't even afford to keep people find a system that provides homes for poor people, and they're living out on the streets just because we've given up on the principles of liberty. So that's not going to be the solution. But there's a lot more to it than the military creating CO2, these burn pits. There's a lot more. They have medical products that they're burning. And I asked somebody recently who had been over there, I said, do they still, you know, we heard more about it when we were very active militarily. Oh no, they said that's their garbage pit and they burn it.
They still do it.
And still exposing our people to it because we have to supervise, you know, these burn pits.
Yeah. Well, here's a couple of other interesting things on the topic of the military pollution. The DoD, Defense Department, the largest oil-consuming government body in the world. Okay, so they do a lot. 400,000 barrels of oil a day are consumed by the Pentagon in peacetime. 400,000 barrels. That's equal to the entire energy consumption of Greece every day. The other thing is the Army calculated it would burn 20 million gallons of fuel in the first 3 weeks of combat in Iraq War II. That equals the entire gasoline used by all of the Allies in World War II, just in those first 3 weeks in Iraq.
You know, and the other thing that we have to put up with, we shouldn't put up with them on purpose, but the hypocrites. You know, you mentioned Gore.
Yeah.
I mean, he flies around in jet airplanes. What about Hollywood?
Yeah.
A few of those individuals preaching this, and you know, maybe here and there have a good point, but they lose all credibility because they don't follow it. It's the same way with policies that create homelessness and wiping out of the middle class, and they endorse the idea that you should have no border controls at all. But in their gated communities, that's not where the homeless go. No. I mean, they take care of themselves. They're such hypocrites. Yeah. You know, that should embarrass them, but believe me, it doesn't embarrass them. They figure, well, we're obligated to take care of ourselves, and I don't know what their motivation is to destroy. Sometimes when I'm in a mood to give them an excuse, it's just plain ignorance, stupidity, and not an understanding of how freedom works and how the markets work and how important it is to have individualism rather than collectivism. Collectivism is engulfing the world right now, and what we're doing in this country is, if you belong to a group, you know, you're not an individual, you're part of a collective, and that to me is a real bad situation for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if you care about the environment, like Dr. Paul and I both do, I see you out there walking all the time. You want to breathe clean air. We all do. Fight war. You know, that is a destruction of the environment. The other thing that I would say is this is the final week to get. Are you worried about bankruptcy? We're all worried about bankruptcy. Well, Dr. Paul has got it all in his new mini book, America's Exceptional Bankruptcy. A week from today, midnight on December 9th. We're gonna end this promotion. Support the show, support the Ron Paul Institute, make your tax-deductible donation. We'll send you this as our gift, as our thank you to you. We're gonna close it in a week so we can make sure you get these before Christmas. They're gonna make great stocking stuffers to all your friends and relatives. There's in the description today, there is more information on how you can make your donation, help us out, help the cause of peace and liberty, and have us give you a copy of Dr. Paul's new book. For $50 or more, we'll send you this. For $100 or more, Dr. Paul will sign it, and we're grateful to you for your support for what we do.
Very good. And I want to close with reiterating so much of what I've said in the past, but just once again, talk about a favorite general of mine, that's Smedley Butler, a well-decorated military person from the beginning of last century. And he did it for years and years, probably 30 years or so, and he was, uneasy about it, but he finally made a decision. He said, I'm only working for the corporations, and I'm tired of it, and wrote this fantastic little booklet. If you haven't read it, you ought to look at it. War is the Health of the State. And some liberals won't mind that too much because their goal is the state. They don't believe people are capable of taking care of themselves, so they have to subject people to put them in a position of dependency, and they purposely do it. The goal of liberty doesn't even cross their mind. It's only liberty for them and subject the other ones to slavery. They wouldn't call it slavery, but that's what they have. When you see people doing this, I think about those homeless people, and we know there's some there that could do more for themselves, but there's some there. It just blew my mind when I realized some of them have jobs. They're trying, but because of the inflation, they can't afford it. So if they really cared about them, they would be looking into this this whole notion. But more government is not going to be the solution. War is a detriment to liberty. It is very, very rare when war is necessary to preserve liberty or gain liberty. I would think that our constitutional changes in the beginning of our nation probably, came out pretty well compared to so many other wars. But what has been going on, if you just narrowed it down to this century, bad news for liberty, bad news for peace, bad news for our environment, bad news for the economy, and it's going to change because it's not long lasting. If this could last forever, and we could benefit, we'd still have a few people in the street, but boy, all we have to do is print faster. The president tells the Fed, print faster and faster, stocks go up, and everybody's going to be happy, like fun. The stocks that go up like that artificially and they skyrocket, they come crashing down, and people have to live reality. And the main interest I have is our liberties don't crash down, and that is what happens under these conditions. You lose liberty when the conditions get bad, and the cultural Marxists I think that's their goal. Come down because they believe in authoritarianism. They believe the few should take care of the many, and they have to be subjective to their whims of the people who run the government. So there is an answer to this. It's not complex. We've had a taste of it in our history, and that is emphasizing the importance of the individual, the responsibility of the individuals, the purpose of having peace and prosperity. And that is, you have to reject the notion that if you don't want anybody to hurt you, don't ever hurt anybody else. Don't touch their property and don't touch them. And that simple rule would go a long way to making the world a much better place to live. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.